in a very warm way.
But what is the nucleus, though, of differences between Muslims and others? What's the reference point?
The reference point, I think, there is something, of course, there are differences in the details. We believe or we worship the one God, but who is this one God, and how can this one God be described? Here we have differences. Would Jesus be the Son of God in its literal meaning, or we accept it as a spiritual Son of God, or something like this, as all messengers of God or all prophets? We have these details, of course, we have differences in these details, but this should not eclipse or cover or overshadow the general background that we believe that there is a creator for this world, and we shall go back to this creator, and there is a day of judgment, and there is accountability, and there are moral values on which all of us, all the biblical or the Abrahamic people believe. We believe in all this, and this is more than common grounds for agreement. But differences are there, and the differences should not. I can ask a Christian about what he believes. He can ask me about what I believe. We can explain to one another. And realizing or recognizing the difference does not mean or should not mean hostility between one another, but better understanding, because it is better to understand the differences from the same source rather than reading about it in a book which may be distorting the facts. So this sort of dialogue, of conversation, of better understanding is required. And this happened. I believe I spent my childhood in Upper Egypt, in a small town, in which my mother was used to talk about the priest of the area as our father, Abuna. And not any priest in Egypt, at least at that time, at that early time, was called rather than father. From Muslims, from Christians, from anybody. He is the father. He is the father of all. And participating in all the festivals, in all the occasions here and there. Sometimes these Christians were raised to very high places, positions, even in Middle Ages under the Islamic Caliphate and so on. Some of them were ministers, some of them were high administrators, some of them were very, very successful businessmen. So it happened that when the people have self-confidence, it is very important, because when you have no self-confidence, then you begin to be suspicious about everything. And you have the conspiracy thinking about anyone else. But when you have self-confidence, you look to the others as equal, and they cannot hurt you because you have this self-confidence. After the colonial period and the missionary activities and all this and what happened, of course the self-confidence of the Muslims was shaken. And accordingly, we find this sort of conspiracy mentality, which is still until now, that many people, anything good, anything positive, can hide something if you wanted to think bitterly about anything. So this is the situation.
Religions are so powerful in the world, though. I mean, look around historically. The differences between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland, the Palestinians and the Jews, the fight over Jerusalem, and whether it should be belong only to the Jews or it should be the property only of the Palestinians. These emotions are so strong that one has to ask, are there any limitations, though? Are the beliefs so strong that they really impose limitations of reaching out and joining one another?
I believe that the limitations are in the guidance of God, and that's why everything within the guidance of God, it has limits. And the limits or borders of any feeling, of any principle, legally or ethically, should be guided by the Lord of the universe and the Creator and the Lord who gave us this religion, but allowing this religion to the people to interpret it according to their instincts and reflect on the divine message all the human limitations and the human faults and failures, of course, would lead to this. The point is that we do not admit or we do not like religion to guide the people anymore, but the religion is there within the spirit and the heart and the mind of every person, and it is working, whether we like it or not, and in a good or a bad way. So what we are saying is, let the Creator or let the Lord of this world, of this universe, guide the people how they should worship Him. Otherwise, they would be mistaken in any extreme. In extreme of thinking that they should annihilate or terminate all the other religions, or the extreme of leaving the religion completely, and then other gods will come, false gods will come, and they will kill one another under another name. Because we were always afraid from religion because of the bloodshed as a result of that. The bloodshed didn't stop for imperial reasons, for ethnic reasons, for class struggle, for anything. It continued because it is with the human instinct, with the human creation. And the religion, because it is from the Creator who creates the human beings and who know the positives and negatives of these human beings, the good and the evil, can guide the person in and nurture the good in every human being and restrict the evil in every human being, because they are there. And this is the implication of the free will, that the free will is there and any person can do good, can do bad, can understand good, can understand right, can understand wrong. So here we should give the guidance, give the compass to the Creator of it, so that the ship would be directed to safety and security in this ocean with these severe waves and storms.
Historically, how have non-Arabs been treated by Arabs? Was there a great deal of tolerance and understanding?
Yes, definitely. Under a certain time, I think if we take the early period, it was the ideal period, because the teachings of the religion were fresh at that time, the early caliphs. Under the Umayyads, who followed the early caliphs, there was a sort of Arab chauvinism for a certain time. They looked to the others as people who of inferior stage. But this sort of injustice was reversed suddenly, because many of these different ethnic groups or different ethnicities and races and languages and cultures became Muslims and could reach the leadership. And this happened very easily. After the Arabs, a long time of leading, of Arab leading or Arab leadership of the Muslim world, maybe a century or something, we had, after this only century, all the following centuries until now, there are the non-Arabs leading the Muslims before nationalism. The caliphate came under the Persian influence, the Turkish influence, and we had leaders from the Turks, we had leaders from the Persians, and there was no sensitivity at all from having, as a matter of fact, it was the equality of Islam here might lead to some disadvantage, that the people did not think about whether the leader really is capable of leading or not. They just look to him as a Muslim, and he is our brother from Persia or from Turkey or from whatever ethnic group, and he is supposed to have a chance. As a matter of fact, nationalism gives some restrictions that you do not like a foreigner to rule you. With the Muslims, they became open, according to this universality, to any person who is Muslim, of course, who should be a Muslim, but can get the leadership. With the colonists, it was different, because the colonists, it is not just because they were Christians, but because of their way of ruling the Muslims and the oppressions. I can claim historically, and I think any historian can see this, that the Crusades were forgotten until they were revived by the colonial experience. Muslims forgot completely anything about Crusades. Even the only people who studied this were children at schools. But the society, the Muslim society, the Muslim masses forgot completely the Crusades as an historical experience until it was revived by the colonists and the missionary activities, and then they began to be reminded, oh, in the past it happened so and so and so. The same thing, it happened with regard to Judaism, with the Jews. There was a bad experience in Medina, but just after this bad experience, the Jews were a part of the Muslim society everywhere and were a very constructive element in the Muslim society in Muslim Spain. So it happened that the experiences, the bad experiences, can be forgotten if something positive can overflow and cover and overwhelm this past experience. But when the present reminds with the past, there is an accumulation of bitterness and it explodes in conflicts.
Where are we now, though? For example, how would a non-Muslim be treated in an Islamic state?
I can say in general, it is positive. But I should be fair to say also that there may be individual cases in which there might be some injustice or some conflicts. But these sort of things should be contained by, and it is contained by the wise people in both parties. I don't think that any leader who feels his responsibility or her responsibility would encourage this. So there are certain individual cases, but fortunately they are considered individual, not a general rule in any place where Muslims and non-Muslims are there.
But they can practice their profession. They can compete economically. They can practice their religion.
Of course, and their churches, their synagogues are protected by the Islamic law, are protected by the Islamic security forces, not only just in the modern state. It is in the Quran that Muslims should protect mosques, synagogues, monasteries, and churches by name specifically. That legitimate defense should be offered only to defend these places when they are attacked or when the religious freedom is under any sort of attack. So they had their own synagogues, churches, freedom. Sometimes they had their own courts in the Middle Ages to deal with their marriages, divorces, inheritances, or something like this. If they do not want to apply the Islamic law, they can go to the general court to apply the Islamic law, or if they like, they have their own special courts, religious courts. Sometimes they, not some, in all the history, they had their own processions, parades, festivals, everything. I think they had full freedom according to what is meant by freedom or rights in the Middle Ages. We cannot, of course, expect that a caliph would be a Christian, for example. In the Middle Ages, this was impossible because the state was based on a certain religion. And the concept of general citizenship or citizenship for any person from any religion and the relation to the nation or to the country or to the land, not to the religion, was not there. So it is unfair to say, well, they were not caliphs or they were not kings. This would not happen in the Middle Ages in any country. Also in Christian countries, you cannot expect a Jew to be a king or to be a monarch or to be a minister. But within the general concepts or the general background of the Middle Ages, they had very good chances of equality. Sometimes there was injustice, but also injustice was inflicted on Muslims in the same time. Some despots, of course, mistreat Muslims and non-Muslims, and it happened that they tried to suck or to exploit the rich people. Many rich people were non-Muslims, so of course they suffered. This happened in history, but it was not meant against a Christian because he was a Christian, but because he was a rich person. And also the Muslim who was rich might be exploited by a despot. This happened in Middle Ages.
Talk some more about the Spanish Inquisition.
Well, the Spanish Inquisition, as a matter of fact, it is a pity, because I understand that political power can go and can be lost and so on. So those who lost their power to the Muslims can come back and rule and so on. But to let the people of other faiths suffer from this and to consider that it is a sort of religious treason, not just a circulation of power according to different factors, and considering the Jews and the Muslims responsible for allowing the Islamic rule in Spain, which was a period of civilization and so on, letting the people suffer for this reason and using cruelty and really a very, very cruel way of inquiry and torture in inquiry and in punishing these people. It was really a pity that this was under the cloak of Christianity. It is something that Christianity has no responsibility about it, but of course it is narrow-mindedness and selfishness and ignorance of this period. It was ironic, really, that these people, when they became the rulers of the country, they used all the remaining elements of the Muslim civilization in architecture, in painting, in all their civilization, because they were in the north, isolated, and they didn't benefit from the civilized part of their country. And they had to rely on the architects, on the masons, on every person, every artist, every craftsperson, every doctor, every scientific person in building their country. And this is very clear now in their palaces. When we saw them in Spain, we find that Arabic is there because the Arabic was the decoration. Sometimes they put something that they do not know its meaning because they rely on Arab or people who know Arabic, and Arabic was used in decoration, and it was used in their palaces. So it was really a pity that we have this bad experience in the relation, and I am aware now that Spain is trying to revive the heritage of the Muslims when they were there, to say that it is a period of the Spanish history. And of course, the Spanish scholars of Islamic studies had a very marvelous effort in this way. But still, of course, and in the south, you find in Spain until now, there is a feeling, without the government, without anything, there is a feeling of respect for the Arabs. Now many Arabs go to Spain in tourism or to spend time or something like this. So it was a bad experience, but of course, and it was led not by Christianity, but by the arrogance and injustice of the people in that time, who thought that Islam or Muslims should suffer because they allowed the other. And I believe that the same thing was repeated in Bosnia, because the Bosnians are Slavs who were converted to Islam. They had nothing to deal with the Turks or the Ottoman Empire, but they are punished by the Serbs, who consider them traitors that they betrayed Christianity by accepting Islam. I think all this sort of narrow-mindedness and egocentrism or egotism or something like this would vanish gradually by the spread of education and understanding that if I have a different faith or a different political situation or a different ethnicity, this does not make me your enemy.
And the writings of the Orientalists, how did Muslims react?
Well, the problem here, the Orientalists had sometimes very, very positive thing in dealing with the Islamic and the Arabic heritage, knowing Arabic and Persian and these Islamic languages, trying to publish some of this heritage, the manuscripts and so on. But the problem is about the intentions. Were they, especially in the beginning, doing this for the sake of knowledge or to use all this information against Muslims or giving it to be used by the colonists to oppress and suppress the Muslims? Noticing that this movement started under the patronage or under the sponsorship of the ministries of colonial affairs and under the church and the missionary bodies, of course, it made this effort directed towards picking up certain points and exaggerating them and picturing, giving an image for the Muslim civilization or for the Muslim history, that it was a history of evil, of cruelty, of war, of bloodshed. But to make this a general picture or a general rule or a general image, this was the wrong thing of the Orientalists or the so-called. Now the scholars who are dealing with Islam are trying to abandon this sign or this label because of its disadvantages and its abuse. They call themselves now, no, we are not Orientalists anymore, because Orientalists devoted their efforts mainly to studying Arabic or Persian or whatever and these sources and so on. No, we are now either sociologists or political scientists or literary scholars or whatever, philologists, linguists, but we are not Orientalists anymore. This proves that the name has not become so respectable, especially in the scholarly area. And they are trying now to say, no, except in Germany. You cannot find a person called Orientalist now except in Germany. But in France, in England, in the United States, in many countries, they say, we are scholars who are studying history, social sciences, political sciences, economics in the Muslim countries, but this does not mean that we are Orientalists in the meaning that the Orientalist devotes his effort principally to the language and to the Quran. No, we are not like this now. So this movement, of course, considering that their students became the elite of the Muslim countries during the late 19th century and the 20th century, where the early professors at national universities in these Muslim countries, they gave a bad image of the Muslims and of the Muslim civilization. But now we had these sources which of Western scholars who talk about the book of Sarton, Introduction to the History of Science, and speaking about scientists, Muslim scientists, and the role of the Muslim scientists in the universal history of science and their contributions and so on. Bertrand Russell, who cannot be described as an advocate of Islam or a friend, and he spoke about the Muslims and their experimental attitude in science, not just speculative attitude like before. It was now the situation the equation has become more correct, and the situation has been reversed. And we look now to the scholars, the genuine scholars of the West, as good historians and who could prove really the glories of the Muslim civilization.
In your book, Children of Adam, an Islamic Perspective on Pluralism, you write, let me quote you, Islamic civilizations have reflected in their history the pluralism emphasized in the message of Islam and its laws. Exactly how did that happen?
It happened in all the fields of daily life. Let us talk about business. They were people who are doing business in the same commercial area, which might be called bazaar or whatever, and we may call now the mall or whatever, the area of business. You will find non-Muslims with the Muslims, non-Arabs with other ethnicities. You find also in the positions of the state. As a matter of fact, for a long time, the physicians of the court were non-Muslims, and sometimes some of them were the leaders of their communities, the non-Muslim community, and in the same time the physician of the caliph. So we do not find, all the services were given by the state to every person according to the law and according to the practice. They would not dig a canal or pave a road because it helps Muslims or serves Muslims, and when it doesn't serve, it serves non-Muslims, they refrain from this. All the services of the state, economical services, social services, even giving the poor. It was reported that the Caliph Omar, once he was walking and he saw an old man begging, and he realized that he was a Jew, and he told the treasurer to give him from the money of the zakat, because he's a poor like any Muslim poor, and he should get the assistance of the state. So as a matter of fact, all the services, all the assistance, all the help was given to them, equal opportunities, and this was represented even on the political arena when they could climb the ladder to the highest position, minister of the state.
But Professor, can the advantages of Muslim society be revived today, and if so, how?
Well, I believe that the shortcut is to rely on the guidance of the creator of the human being, and who knows the human psychology and the human mentality. So if we stick to the guidance of God, and instead of isolating the person from religion or leaving the person to interpret for himself or herself the guidance of religion, we should realize that the separation of the state and the church does not mean the separation of the state or the society from the guidance of God. This should be represented in words and in practice to the people. The Muslim leaders, as well as all religious leaders, are invited to make the houses of worship, mosques, synagogues, churches, monasteries, places of real brotherhood and fraternity. They should invite others, and this is happening in America now. I think